Release material for question 4. The key bit we use in the question here is the stuff on Engel's coefficient. It did also give us this equation in the question, but hopefully if you did the work with the pre-release materials before the exam, you found it useful when you came to that part. First we need to do is just count how many years were there more than 25% of the population living below the poverty line, and there were 3. I think a few of you switched off after the first 2 and didn't look any further, but you got a mark just for spotting those 3. Making a comment about the table. There's only one comment, didn't have to go into depth, something along these lines, or could have been referencing some figures. Part C threw a few people with the exchange rate. So we're told here that a pound is equal to 141. So we can see there we're multiplying it that way by 141. We want to find out what $1.90 is in pounds. So that way we'd be multiplying by 1.41. So this way we've just got to divide by 1.41. And that gives us £1.35, and it needed to be given with those 2 decimal places. Here you had to comment on this newspaper headline, given the fact that 700 million people were living below that poverty line of $1.90, and at the time the world population was 7,400 million. One way you could have done it was to just to find 1/10 of 7,400 million. Or you could have found what percentage of 7,400 million 700 million was. Or if you did 7,400 divided by 700, and that gives you about 10.5, so 10.6. And that means that it's 1 in every 10.6 people. So either of these were fine for doing the calculations. To then get the mark, you had to decide whether it was a realistic summary or not. You could either say yes or no, but you had to justify it with reference to your calculation. So for example, if you got this 740 million, you could say yes, it's realistic because they're fairly close. Or you could have said, no, it's not realistic because it's about 40 million people out. The second mark was about your justification. For part 2 here, we had to divide the total wealth in the world by the world population. And you got 2 marks for getting that far, but it says to give your answer to a sensible accuracy. The least amount of rounding that the mark scheme allowed was to the nearest dollar. You could do it to the nearest 10, nearest 100, nearest 1,000. But as long as you showed you had rounded it to some figure in between those. So here we're using Engel's coefficient, which we'd seen in the work on the pre-release materials before. And we had to calculate with these figures what the description of the state of poverty or wealth was. So we had to do the amount spent on food divided by the total income. And I could use the values like that, but remember, if I divide top and bottom by 1,000, I'm still going to get the same figure. I could easily divide it by another 100. I'm still going to get the same figure at the end of it. And you should get 0.4878, and it goes on. So we then had to use this on the table, and we'd find out it was in this section here for moderate prosperity. The question did allow, if you had rounded it here to 0.5, and so you'd got this for only basic needs met, as long as you had shown you'd rounded into that and used that, then you still got the marks for it. It helps in the last part to write out the formula for Engel's coefficient with what we know. And if we rearrange this, We get our answer of 116,000 pesos.